Hello, welcome, and herzlich willkommen to the Divorce Couch. My name is Simone. I'm a divorce coach, and I live in Germany. This is episode number 2.
I'm Salma. I'm also a divorce coach, and I'm based in London, UK.
Hi, I'm Claire. I'm a divorce coach, and I live in Northern Ireland.
And hello, I'm Jackie, and I'm a divorce coach based in the north of England.
Brilliant. Today, we would like to talk about the tipping point. It's basically where we are sharing our experiences when it has become about I. And I would like to read out what a tipping point is qua definition. It's the point at which a series of small changes or incidents become significant enough to cause a larger, more important change. We would like for you to have a takeaway, which is basically what do I want? What do you want? And if you're not there yet, it's about begin to notice, allow yourself to want. So I am opening today's episode. Salma, would you like to say what was your tipping point? When have you realized, okay, this is now a significant moment enough for me to kind of like shift?
I think I've been thinking about this over the last couple of days, and I think there were many tipping points because the period during which I was thinking about divorce or leaving, or it took me a number of years to get to that place. And like you said, it's a sequence of smaller events that sort of lead you to that big moment of decision, as it was in my case. And I think in my case, a tipping point was that I'd felt alone for a very long time. I'd felt alone in the marriage. I'd felt like I was surrounded by people, but alone. Mm-hmm. And I think there was a particular incident where I was sitting in A&E with my daughter, and she was about 3 years old, and sitting in the waiting room by myself. And I think for me, that was a tipping point. And it was just a realization that actually I could do this by myself. I was doing this by myself, but actually what I was doing it by myself with a huge amount of baggage that I was carrying along the way. And I think that was sitting in that waiting room, waiting to be seen by a doctor, was actually the moment for me where I suddenly realized that I could do this on my own. And I had been doing it for a very long time. For me, definitely, that was a significant turning point.
Okay. In terms of then taking the next steps to look at your marriage, is that what I'm getting?
I think for me, it was the point at which I had enough courage to say it out loud. And in fact, it was on my return from the hospital was the first time I said the words that I'm filing for divorce. And I, to this day, the place that I was standing in, the moment, I think even the sort of the tension in the room, I can still sense that when I'm standing in that space. But I also remember feeling a huge sense of relief, almost, that I had finally said what I had been thinking about for an incredibly long time, and had actually felt like I'd been carrying the burden around for a very long time, and suddenly feeling almost liberated. Not that it got any easier from that moment onwards. There was a period of time, obviously, where things got a lot harder. But in terms of taking that first step and pushing me over the edge, I think that was the defining moment in my life.
Yeah, that's quite interesting, Salma, because it seems as though from your tipping point to actually making the decision was very quick. And I can remember for myself that, obviously I hadn't been happy for a long time, really, but it was listening to something on the radio that actually was talking about relationships, and it just came on the radio, and it said that if you're in a relationship, you should be happy about 80% of the time, and 20% there's going to be disagreements.
Yeah.
And that really resonated with me. I can almost remember standing in the kitchen thinking, oh my God, well, how much of the day am I happy? And I thought, oh my God, I'm actually happy probably less than 20% of the day and unhappy.
Mm-hmm.
And I can just remember standing there thinking that. But then, so it was almost, it dawned on me then that actually this wasn't good. It wasn't good for either of us. And something was going to have to happen. But it was quite some time after that. It took me quite some time to get to the point of the actual separation. So it's just quite interesting that yours was a quick situation and mine was quite lengthy. It dawned on me, and then it was like, right, now what am I going to do?
Yeah.
It just shows that it can be different.
I was a bit, I have a bit of an interesting journey in that I remember one time thinking, so my kids were small and I worked in A&E on the management team, and I was involved in my ex-husband's job role. So life was very busy, you know, with his mum who was elderly, and we moved her up to where we lived. And I'm the kind of person who can do 4 things and think of 10 others at the one time. Now, just because I can do that doesn't mean it's good for me. It just means that that's what I did. And I remember one time thinking, I have a day off. What am I going to do? And then I remember thinking, what do I want to do? And then I thought, well, what do I like? And I started to realize that I didn't actually know. I didn't know how to unwind. I didn't know how to put something into my world that I would really enjoy and look forward to. And then how on earth would I ever make that a routine? Because with doing shift work, I didn't ever really want to commit to something like an evening class. I mean, I love cooking. There's lots of things I love. But from a commitment perspective, because of work and the children, it just became something I just thought, well, I can't do it. And so I started to notice that and put in a few different things and meeting friends for coffee. And I mean, one of my reset things is walking on a beach in the water, preferably in Greece. But if I can't do it in Greece, the beach is only about 5 or 6 miles away. So it's great. And so what happened was I went to my cousin's wedding and I woke up at 3 a.m. This was down south. I woke up at 3 a.m. and I thought, I'm not doing this anymore. And I decided at that point that I was going to have a discussion with my ex-husband about it, because I didn't quite know how to navigate it. So we did a few weeks later, I said to him, look, this isn't working for me and I don't know how to make it work and I don't know what to do. But if it doesn't change, then I'm not going to stay in this because it's not working for me. And if it's not working for 2 people, it's just not working. And so that would have been about June, and it was another 1.5 years before I actually decided, no, this really isn't working. So in that time, we did counselling and different things, and there were lots of other life events that happened. But it took me from when I made the first point of this isn't what I want, another 1.5 years to go, no, this is really not what I want. And maybe some of that was learning more about me in the process of that 18 months and putting in things that I wanted to do and figuring out what do I like and what does make me happy. And then if I couldn't put it into my world, well, why couldn't I put it into my world? And so my journey was a bit of a short and a start, but then it elongated out. But I think what it did at the end of it was allow me to leave, having found myself to a point where I thought, I know that I want different things in my world, and I don't know how to put them into the world that I'm living in. And therefore, my option is to choose me and to put it into a world that looked different. So that's my story.
Yeah. See, listening to you, because this is very close to tipping points, I quite related to when this whole separation process began. And I originally wanted to come in and talk about a completely different tipping point. And well, then I guess I have two tipping points that defined me to where I am now. And I guess the one is very similar to what you just said, Claire, is basically initiating the conversation. Basically, there was this huge elephant in the room, and I just realized we cannot go on like this. I just sensed it. You know what? It has to be spoken out. And I guess the tipping point for me was that I felt brave enough to now address it. Mm-hmm. It has been a process of months, really, or almost a year. And it felt like everybody was sitting already on packed suitcases, but nobody really wanted to address it. So I guess that was my tipping point when I addressed it, and I wasn't really then initiating freedom as such, but kind of like what you just said, Claire, things didn't then start and kind of like, when I initiated the conversation, now I took things into my own hands. I had no idea how to take things in my own hand. And I think this is then something what I would define as the next tipping point, which is when did I start taking things into my own hand? And to me, that tipping point would be defined as when did I take a step into that dark tunnel, not knowing what would be on the other side, right? This is basically stepping out of being in some sort of relationship or in the separation process, which keeps you so engaged that you're still in it, right? But it's still a dance of two. But for me, the tipping point was when I decided this is going to be now about me. And that is basically probably the moment I made that decision that because I used to live in Singapore and I separated there, is basically to realize the reality does not work for me to become the independent woman that I needed to be after divorce. I am going to ask to relocate to Germany. It was a difficult process, and we probably have way more opportunities to talk about this in other episodes. But that was my episode to basically say, I'm going to go home. I tried to get my children and I home, not knowing what that would entail. Yeah, that was my tipping point B.
I think the interesting thing about us all, what we're talking about here, is when we've decided that actually, we've reached a tipping point. Sometimes in the relationship, you're not aware that there's a tipping point, and it's the other party that reaches the tipping point. Mm-hmm. And I think then it's quite important to recognize when a relationship isn't healthy. I mean, on my journey I've learned about myself that I'm very aware when a relationship isn't healthy, and I will raise issues. But what I don't do is take the next step. That step is difficult. And what I've learned is, yes, you can try to resolve an issue once. You can try to resolve an issue twice. But if that issue isn't being resolved, there has to be change. Absolutely. And somebody has to take control of that. And I think it's recognizing that. And I recognize in myself, I'm very different now, but in the past, I've allowed unhealthy relationships to continue.
Yeah. And I think that's exactly, I know it felt like it was very quick, but I think for myself, that was my tipping point, in the sense that I think that was a day that I realized that I had tried everything that I could possibly have tried. And there was nothing else that I could give or try. And it's almost as if, that moment where you check out. Literally, that was the moment where my tipping point was that's I've got nothing else to give. I've got nothing else that I could possibly do that would help me salvage this. And I think so. It wasn't. It was quick in the sense that I needed the courage to say those words out loud, because I'd been saying them in my head for possibly years or months. But I think, the tipping point, like you said, was, at what point are you going to take action? And I think similarly, with Claire, her action, was to almost open up that conversation rather than just exist and just go along with, like you said, an unhealthy relationship. But it's about taking that action. Not every, even as divorce coaches, our first port of call is not always, to advise clients that, divorce is the only option. It's about, where has the communication broken down? Is there anything that could be changed? And what are you, how are you going to maneuver that situation?
Yeah, I think also, there'll be plenty of you listening here that will be in the other side of a divorce story where you have been left. And so you haven't had a tipping point because you didn't want one and you didn't know that there was ever going to be one. But what we're talking about is the concept that the tipping point is, when do you put you first? when do you decide to take back the driver's seat, go from passenger to driver's seat and go, well, what do I want? So somebody has left you and you're just devastated and your world has ended, and it's not like somebody has died. So that support system that is around in a normal grief journey of a death process just isn't there, and people don't really know how to talk about it. So there's an awful lot of things that go through your mind, that you're just so lonely and so completely devastated, and you don't want to burden your friends with the same thing, but it's how you're feeling, and that's very, very valid. And I think for you in that position, the tipping point is, when did you decide that you wanted to learn to live again? And we were discussing the other day, and I was saying sometimes I have found in my journey that language and words comes in hindsight for me. So now with language and words, I was listening to something a while ago and it talked about the word alive. What does aliveness mean? And I thought, that's the word I didn't have to put on my story. And that was me. But if you are in a situation where somebody has left you and you're devastated, are you feeling alive? Or do you want to feel alive? And if you want to feel alive again, what does that look like? And how do you start the journey from that point to going forward? And that's where your tipping point starts to come in. So it's different concept, but the same idea of, when do we as people that have been in a relationship begin to put us first and go, well, what would I like? What do I like? What could I do? How do I want my life to look? That's the tipping point, regardless of which part of the story or which side of a coin you're on. And it's all different, but the concept is so similar. What do you think, guys?
I love it. I think, and even if you do not find answers immediately, ask yourself, what would happen if I don't take this step? If I continue like this for 1 year, for 5 years, basically, then what don't I want, right? Then maybe this would start the process of thinking, you know what, maybe I want to change something. You know what?
I think, again, I know I sort of keep saying, I think sometimes people don't even realise when they're in the situation how unhealthy it is. They just keep going along, and you know, coming to the point where you choose yourself. I think it was, is it John Gottman who has done sort of about 40 years research into tipping points, and that he says for every one negative interaction between a couple, there needs to be 5 positive interactions. So I think that's just something you can sort of almost look at your relationship, not encouraging people to separate by any means, but that's actually something that, like you said, Salma, you know, things can be worked on. Then you can look at your relationship and say, well, actually, there is more negative. We need to work on that. But there definitely has to be a point where you start to look and think, what am I getting out of life myself? Am I actually enjoying and getting pleasure out of each day? And if you're not, and it's less than sort of 80%, then maybe there's something not right.
Yeah. And I think the first step towards that is to accept that something isn't right. Because sometimes we know that things aren't right, but we're fearful of addressing it because we're fearful of the consequences of having those conversations, or, you know, what the outcome will be. I mean, it's an incredibly, you know, scary proposition, because this is, even if a situation is negative and hurtful, it's still familiar, and that's what we like to be. We like to be in a place where we know what to expect tomorrow morning, even if it's painful. So stepping out of that sometimes can be really difficult, because we don't know what we're walking into, right? If we open up a conversation about a relationship, you know, we're always worried that, you know, things are going to go horribly wrong. But if we don't have those conversations and we don't start addressing those issues, then it won't change.
You know, and what will it cost us, right? Because you know, if you're the person who is aware, who has stepped into this zone of awareness, and you don't then react with it, you are almost at a cul-de-sac, right? Then you basically boycott yourself by not addressing it. And what does it do to yourself? And then the question is, what does it cost you? Something I just thought that I want to throw out there. We're talking not about abusive relationships here. I mean, this is a completely total setup. And please do not think that we are not aware of those dynamics. But this is probably not what we are addressing now. Maybe we decide on making an exclusive YouTube video on that.
Yeah.
I guess, but at the end of the video, we might even, figure out how to have numbers down there, how to call somewhere where you are being helped with immediately, and don't take what we are talking about, because that's probably not the right consequence you want to take if you're in an abusive relationship. And that's just a word of caution that just popped into my mind that I felt, I want to bring it out here.
I think that's really important. That's very important, Simone. So I think, when we sort of start to close this conversation and we look at the concept of what is the takeaway from today's discussion, what we would love for all of you listening is to start to become aware and to notice, because no change will ever happen until we know that it needs to happen. And if we don't know that we need to look for it, then we just stay as we are, and the world turns the way it turns. But we would really encourage you to start noticing the world that you're in. Notice things, if you as a couple make a decision to do something and you think, oh, I don't really want to do that. Notice those things. And then notice, is it possible for you to say, well, maybe we could do this the next time? Are you able to put things into your world that actually are things that you would like to do because they would bring you joy, for whatever the reason happens to be? Because none of us are all the same. So when we're in a relationship, we all have different things. But I think noticing the world that you're in and noticing how you are showing up in the world by way of what is in it that you enjoy, what actually makes you feel, oh, I love this. And is any of that in your world? Is there a lot in your world? Could you put more in? And what do you do with that? But the first step is just to notice. So just stay in your world and start to become aware and start to think, oh, well, there were like 3 things yesterday that I would have maybe done a bit differently. And it starts to give you a real picture of the world that you're in, regardless of which side of a coin you're on a divorce journey or what your relationship is like. Because we can all improve all of our relationships all the time, but only if we notice that maybe there's something that could be improved upon. So we hope that you'll join us again for the next time. Grab a coffee, come and join us on the couch when we have another discussion on the next topic that we're going to choose.
Auf Wiedersehen.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.